Prey is the Predator movie I didn't know I needed. After the disaster of 2018's The Predator, I was ready to just never see this character again. Really, it's been rough for the Predator over the decades. The original movie is brilliant, forever in my top 5. The second movie is, I wouldn't call it good. It introduces cool concepts like how predators won't kill a pregnant woman, which is logically extrapolated onto Alien vs. Predator, where a predator won't kill an old man dying of cancer. But really the only thing I like about Predator 2 is the last 20 minutes, hunting him in the giant freezer and the chase through the city and the spaceship at the end. I can leave the rest of it. Alien vs. Predator 1 and 2, what can I really say? They aren't good movies at all, but I like the pyramid setting and the traps of the original. I think the fight scenes are fun, but that's about it. And in part 2, I get some fanboy satisfaction from seeing a Predalien on screen. And the actual Predator of the movie is really cool. I like how he sets up traps in the sewer, the action in the power station makes me think of the old AVP video games, but yeah, the movie overall is quite bad. Predators in 2010 was definitely worthy of getting excited about. Robert Rodriguez was directing, and the premise of a bunch of criminals waking up on an alien planet being hunted by predators was an interesting take on the original's formula. Unfortunately, the characters are all pretty unlikable, including Adrien Brody in the lead. It introduces a higher class of predators, the alpha predators, which I absolutely hate because it means the classic Predator isn't the most badass thing in the movie franchise anymore. And worst, the best idea of the entire movie is the character played by Lawrence Fishburne, and he's wasted. He's been on this planet for years, just trying to survive. That's an interesting character. Let's follow him and see what he's learned in all this time. What are his tactics? Has he killed a bunch of predators? Does he become the real Predator, hunting these alien creatures, using their technology against them? That sounds like a fun movie. Oh wait, he dies immediately. The less said about 2018's The Predator, the better. I'll just say that I sat with my head in my hands for about 5 minutes when the credits rolled. So I gave up. I didn't want another Predator movie for the same reason I don't want another Silent Hill. I'm tired of seeing a franchise I love get abused over and over. Along comes Prey with a back-to-basics story about a young Native American girl trying to prove she's got what it takes to be a hunter in her tribe, who crosses paths with an early tech predator rampaging through the lands. No twists or surprises in the story, but we get some solid setup and payoff, some of the best violence ever seen in the entire Predator franchise, and some really impressive cinematography. It's far from a perfect movie, you just can't compare it to the perfection of the original, and I'm gonna have to get into what I see as the primary issues that hold this movie back from being truly great, but I'll let you know now that I really liked Prey, and I recommend it to any fan of the original film or the character overall. Naru, our main character, isn't super complex, but she's likable. More likable than Adrien Brody, anyone in the 2018 movie, and even Danny Glover in my opinion, because I always felt like he was just doing his normal Danny Glover lethal weapon thing in Predator 2. I enjoyed spending long periods of time following Naru's journey through the wilderness, going on hunts with the other hunters, and just generally struggling to accomplish what's so important to her. The portrayal of Naru's tribe looks great, but there's a cleanliness to it that tends to distract. It looks like everyone is wearing freshly cleaned, newly made Native American costumes instead of feeling like they're really living as hunter-gatherers in the Great Plains. The rest of her tribe, apart from Naru, are mostly filled with non-characters, which is a shame given how memorable everyone was in the original film. Her brother gets some decent screen time as he goes from mentoring her, to doubting her and saying she should give up, to fighting by her side in the end. He's fine, but the dialogue, whew. Characters are likable when they aren't talking. Maybe the biggest negative here is the dialogue. Watch any review and you'll hear the same. It's incredibly off-putting seeing all these 18th century Native Americans speaking modern English. I get it, that would have been a lot of work to get these young actors to learn and speak fluent Comanche, so I think it's excusable for the kind of movie this is. But at the same time, I think it could have been done. You could have cut a lot of dialogue and kept the movie really quiet, with occasional speaking between characters in Comanche, and we would just understand what people are thinking and feeling by seeing them through good filmmaking. The movie really draws you in with its cinematography, so I think this could have worked. Naru is smart and capable, but clumsy and regularly comes up short. She gets caught by traps, gets injured during hunts, and she doesn't get any respect from the young men in her tribe as she's trying not to do the normal thing of staying home and cooking and taking care of everyone else. I'm sure some oversensitive zealots out there will start screaming about feminism, but come on, this feels like a pretty authentic situation to me. It's not that female warriors didn't exist ever, but it was pretty common for women to not have a place in the hunting or fighting duties. And I find it very believable that in a small tribe like this, there could be a woman that wants to do something other than what she's told she has to do. Fine by me. It's not an amazing character arc. She wants to be a hunter and then she gets to be one. But I'm not gonna start complaining about lack of complexity in a Predator movie. Complexity is what brings these stories down. Arnold's character doesn't go through some personal transformation in the original. He just learns that outsmarting the Predator is better than overpowering it, and so he does that. End of movie. Same thing happens here. Naru gets in some really good hits against the Predator, but only because she takes her time to set it up. She leaves a blood trail to a severed leg, while the Predator doesn't see her up in the trees, and she uses the opportunity to leap on him and hack away with her tomahawk. It's good stuff. But there's one setup she does that I found hard to believe. There's a medicinal flower that's set up several times in the movie, since Naru learned medicine from her mother. I think that's her mother. This plant is used to treat badly wounded people, and it's said to treat fevers and cool the blood, so it lowers your body temperature. And I thought, that sounds a bit far-fetched to me. She uses it in a trap where the Predator is walking up to a wounded guy to investigate, and she eats the plant and starts shaking. It lowers her body temperature so she doesn't appear on the Predator's thermal vision. He walks right by her and then she takes the opportunity to shoot him in the back of the head. It's one of the most awesome scenes in the movie, but I couldn't buy it. I went looking around, and I'll leave a link to the Screen Rant article that talks about the actual plants this one is based on, and apparently they really are used to slow blood flow and treat fevers, causing blood to flow to the skin, cooling the core of the body. So maybe? I don't know if it would so drastically cool your body in 15 seconds as to make you invisible to heat vision. I think the movie would have been better off going the traditional mud covering direction, but I guess I can let it go. 'Cause there's some iffy stuff in this movie, not necessarily in concept, but in execution. Like, the whole finale just feels rushed. I think there should have been a few more minutes of fighting, and we don't really get to spend time with Naru as she's preparing for the final confrontation. We just see glimpses of traps she's set up. I would have loved to really see her process like we did in the original. Now, the Predator itself, I mostly like a lot. He's a bit different, but still feels classic in his movements and attitude. I just don't like his face. I don't know why they had to change his face so much to the point where this feels like another class like the Alpha Predators. I think that was unnecessary. And it seems like his mask is just for armor and tech control, not for breathing in the Earth's atmosphere. In all the other Predator movies on Earth, the masks are set up with a breathing system. And even though they end up taking off their masks at the end, you at least get the impression that they probably can't survive for hours without it. This new Predator doesn't seem to have any kind of breathing apparatus, despite it being a Predator from 250 years before the first movie. If I missed something important here, leave a comment. Maybe these tubes aren't for breathing at all. Aside from those criticisms, I love this guy. He's so menacing. Every Predator movie seems to imply that predators only care about humans on Earth, with other hunts being against other alien creatures. I never considered that a predator might get off on fighting non-human foes on Earth, but it totally makes sense. Predators want a good fight, so it was really interesting to see him study the hunting patterns of other Earth animals and determine who a good kill would be. His first kill is a snake, as he stands invisible observing the food chain. Next, he watches as a wolf chases a rabbit, and he thinks this is a good fight to get started with. Maybe he's not even here specifically looking for a human to fight. Then the Predator takes on a bear, and man, I didn't know I needed this in my life. Predator versus bear is so awesome. The bear really messes him up too. Or it seems that way. If I had another criticism, it's that the Predator doesn't seem to be affected by any of the massive damage he takes. He's mauled by a bear, chopped up with a tomahawk, impaled by a spear, shot in the head, and he's just coming at 100% still. I would have liked to see him get weaker over time. We only see him heal a small wound, so these big injuries are not being taken care of. But mentioning the healing scene, as a Predator fan who collects figures and reads some of the comics, this was my favorite stuff in the movie. The tech. Not just the tech, but really getting to see how the Predator does what he does. We get to watch as he cleans the wolf skull and decorates himself with it. We see the gradual damage done to his cloaking system until it doesn't work anymore. We see the gory aftermath of the net launcher. Remember when this thing contained an alien and got tighter and tighter until the acid broke it? Well, on a human, it gets so tight it goes right through him and leaves him as mush. So cool. I also love his shield. He pulls it out to protect against gunfire and then uses it as a weapon to chop people up. This movie really does have the most satisfying Predator action since the original. The CG is not the best. I don't know what the budget was for Prey, but I share Mike Stoklaus's view at this point. I don't really care. Bad CG is far worse in a bad movie, and this isn't a bad movie. Here the CG looks good enough for me to be like, okay, that's a bear, I'll go with it. The last thing I want to talk about is the feel of this movie. I think a lot of people, when they hear there's a new Predator movie coming out and it's going straight to streaming, they assume it's gonna look cheap. You know how so many Netflix movies all look the same and don't even feel like real movies? I was afraid of that here, but just in the first 5 minutes I found myself thinking, wow, this actually feels like a real movie. That's thanks to the talented direction of Dan Trachtenberg and his cinematographer Jeff Cutter. This movie looks fantastic. They excellently set the tone with beautiful sweeping shots of the landscapes, and they make you believe that you're really witnessing something happening in the 18th century, not just a bunch of actors dressed up like Comanches running around in a field or a soundstage. I don't think a single scene was done against a digital backdrop, and if they did, they certainly fooled me. I'm not saying every single scene was captured in the wild, but it definitely feels that way. While I give a lot of credit to the director and cinematographer for setting the tone of this movie, I have to give even more credit to Sarah Schachner for the original soundtrack. The whole time watching this movie, I kept thinking, how is this movie making me feel like I'm watching an epic 90s period piece drama? What is it about this movie that makes me feel like I'm watching Braveheart or something like that? And I finally figured it out. Prey's main song, Naru's theme, is heavily inspired by one of the most beloved movie theme songs of all time, Promontory, from the classic 1992 period piece The Last of the Mohicans, starring Daniel Day-Lewis, directed by Michael Mann. Comparable time period, with the British soldiers moving through Native American territory, the long sweeping shots of landscapes. If you haven't seen it, you should. I recommend the theatrical cut over the director's cut if you can find it. It's literally impossible that the director didn't tell the composer to take influence from this movie's soundtrack, or maybe the composer did it on her own, one or the other. Last of the Mohicans has forever established the musical feel of this time period. It was definitely the right call to take inspiration from it. I'm not complaining about the similarities, as it establishes a serious dramatic mood that helps you take Prey's world and premise more seriously. Check the link below for a side-by-side comparison of the two main theme songs. I wanted to include it here, but it causes copyright issues. You'll see they flow perfectly into each other, especially since they're in the same key. In conclusion, despite flaws large and small, Prey left me very happy as a Predator fan, and I gotta wonder if anyone other than Predator fans are gonna like it that much. A lot of my personal enjoyment came from the stuff that makes me happy as a fan. Predator versus a bear, all the cool tech, and it was nice to see that kind of fan service presented in a well-directed movie with a likable protagonist and a plot that's not ridiculously convoluted. So I think your enjoyment is really going to depend on your experience with the franchise. Honestly, I never expected one of my favorite movies of 2022 to be a direct-to-Hulu Predator movie, but it is. I won't say it's one of the best movies of the year, I find that hard to judge objectively being such a big Predator fan, but I will say it's one of my personal favorites. Thanks for watching.